It's time to accelerate. Hey friends, this is Andy. Welcome to episode 566 of Accelerate, the sales podcast of record. Joining me on the show today for the second time is David Brunner. David is the founder and CEO of ModuleQ, and he was previously on Accelerate on episode 200. In that show, we had a great conversation about how to elevate your sales productivity. Now, in this episode, David joins me to talk about technology and its impact on sales. In particular, we're going to talk about bots and their increasing utilization in messaging platforms like text, Slack, HipChat, and so on. And he's also going to share his thoughts and his insights about artificial intelligence and some of the impacts and influence that AI will have on our future in sales. You really want to make sure you check this episode out. If you'd like to see the show notes for this particular conversation, go to andypaul.com/566. As always, we provide a timestamp breakdown of this and all the conversations we have here on Accelerate. Now, friends, we all hit a sales slowdown from time to time. It's inevitable. And oftentimes sellers default to the notion that the solution to a slowdown is either more structure or more process. But sometimes you just need to try some new ideas to break out of the doldrums and to sell up to your potential. So if you're looking for some new sales ideas about how to amp up and accelerate your sales, then you need to read the new report I've put together just for you. It's based on specific recommendations from more than 300 experts that I've personally interviewed on this program. And I've compiled their practical tactics and strategies into a step-by-step guide that you can use to accelerate your sales today. So don't wait. Go to accelerate.fm/accelerate to get your free copy of this report. That's accelerate.fm/accelerate to get your free copy today. Friends, are you following me on Twitter? You'll make sure you do that. Follow me now at Real Andy Paul. Those who already follow me will notice that my Twitter handle has recently changed. Previously, it was at 0 Time Selling, but with all the exciting things we've got going on with Accelerate, with some new developments, perhaps with a new podcast coming at the start of the year, and things around andypaul.com, we decided it's time for a change with Twitter. So follow me at Real Andy Paul. And as I mentioned earlier this week, we're also coming up on a real milestone with the show, 1 million downloads. I mean, it's amazing that we've hit that in such a short period of time. I really appreciate all of you who have invested your time to listen to the show, who invest your time on a regular basis to listen, or even if you just do it from time to time. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate your support. Finally, before we get to the interview, I want to remind you that I want to hear your questions about sales and sales management, the challenges you're facing that perhaps you could use some help with. If you send your questions to me at andy@andypaul.com, each week I'll choose one question from those submitted to answer on my Friday conversation with my friend, my co-host, Bridget Gleason. And the winner, the person who submitted the question that we put on the air, will win a free half-hour coaching call with me. A little speed coaching, but it's a $250 value. So don't delay. Submit your question today. That's at andy@andypaul.com. Okay, let's jump into it with my guest, my friend, David Brunner. David, welcome back to Accelerate.
Thank you, Andy. It's great to be here.
For people keeping track, this is David's second appearance on Accelerate. So we've got, last time I had some standard questions for you. This time a little different standard question. It's one I ask all my guests right at the top of the show. And that is, in your mind, what's the single biggest challenge facing sales reps today?
I think it's complexity, Andy, and the world is the technology landscapes, competition, the number of people and tools you need to interact with to get your work done, to move things forward. In a sense, we all have to run faster and work harder and master more just to stay where, just to prevent from sliding back because the complexity continues to increase so quickly.
But I wonder whether we have to make that sort of a relative measure, because the fact is we've just on our own level of complexity taken the same tack, right? Because we all carry around smartphones, right? There's a level of complexity that in that and just inherent in that and the way we use it with all the variety of apps we use and the way we communicate. So I wonder whether, there's more complexity, but whether we're starting from a higher level. So
I think we have more powerful tools to manage the complexity. But when I think of complexity, to me, what it means is the number and variety of relationships and interactions that you need to stay on top of. And so when you think about the rising number of people involved in deals, the growing number of tools that are involved, the increasing number of players in the technology landscape, the number of different communication media that you need to master and manage simultaneously to stay in touch with folks, the set or the skill set that is required to stay on top of that mass of rapidly evolving relationships and interactions, I think is a bit different from a world where you had a smaller set of things that you could go into more deeply.
Okay. So what are some of those skills to help you manage the complexity?
Well, I think part of it is knowing how to stay focused despite all the different things begging for your attention. And so the people that I've observed are most effective are the ones who are able to set aside time where they don't have distractions. They know when to leave the phone behind. There was some research you may have seen recently that showed that just having your cell phone on your table, on the table in front of you, lowers your IQ by several points.
Yeah.
The natural reaction to this complexity, I think, is to try to multitask more. But unfortunately, I don't think there's many people for whom that's a good answer.
Well, according to the research, it's 0%. That's a good answer for it, right? Just as a species, we're incapable of multitasking. Some people may be better at rapid switching, but no one's capable of holding two thoughts at one time.
I think that's right. And so if you embrace that limitation and find ways to allocate your time during the day and allocate your attention so that you focus on the things that are most important. So I suppose that goes hand in hand with brutal prioritization being key. As the number of demands on your time, the number of tools, the number of people, the number of technologies multiply, you need to get better at making decisions about which ones you're actually going to focus on.
Yeah, another way it sounds like what you're saying, and this I think is a good way to look at it, is that a lot of the complexity is really distraction based, right? It's more complex because we're distracted and not able to focus. And if we can eliminate a lot of the distractions, that's a giant step. It's not the only thing you need to do, but it's a giant step forward in helping you deal with the complexity and the overwhelm.
I think that's right. And I think it's also about triaging, because the challenge is that a lot of those distractions may actually be important, perhaps with a small probability. And so you have to get pretty good at very rapidly getting rid of the things that you shouldn't be focusing on, but spotting the ones that actually represent an opportunity that just walked in.
Okay. All right, so let's jump into talking about, we're going to start a little bit talk about ModuleQ, because that'll lead us into the conversation we're going to have today. So tell us a little bit what you guys have been working on since the last time we spoke.
Yeah, so what ModuleQ is building is what we call people-facing AI, and this is AI to understand you as a professional, because we've seen a lot of companies that have been focused on building AI to understand the data world.
All right, predictive analytics, perhaps, being an example
predictive
of that.
Analytics, natural language processing, search, intelligent search engines,
right?
Tools that can really understand what's going on in the data. But our belief is that unless you also understand what's going on with the people, you can't bridge the gap. And so we're developing this AI in order to deliver the right information to the right person at the right time to make him or her more effective in their role.
All right, so give us an example of what this looks like.
So you're collaborating with some of your team members or coworkers on a large deal. You're having a conversation about in a chat app about how you're going to approach the meeting tomorrow with a client that you've are submitting a revised proposal to, and our AI recognizes that that's what you and your collaborators are talking about, and it makes a connection between a new piece of market research that just got published that is relevant to the company that you're in discussions with, and it pops up its head in the chat with the bot, and it says, you've been discussing company A in the consumer packaged goods market, and there's some recent research that might be relevant here. And there's a link to the document. So something that you might have overlooked, something that might inform that conversation, gets brought into your interaction and injected at a place where it makes sense with the people who are already focused on that topic to be able to digest it.
Okay, so it's a AI-enabled bot that's sitting on a messaging platform.
That's right. That's the delivery mechanism for this intelligence.
Okay.
So what we are focused on, and it goes back to this conversation about distractions and complexity, we're focused on how do we bring this information to you in the place that is most natural, most timely, most contextually relevant. So instead of you having to make constant context switches or getting alerts about things that come out of left field, you're having a conversation about some topic with other people that are interested in that topic. And after just the right pause in the conversation, the bot speaks up and says, hey, here's something that appears to be complementary.
Okay. So do you set preferences with the bots?
So at this point, we don't have any preferences that you can tune.
Okay.
We actually, that's part of the goal of the AI algorithms, is that we actually are watching. In a sense, we're tuning the preferences based on every action you take. And so the more things that the bot says that you just completely ignore, or you even tell the bot you hit the not useful button, the more we're going to sort of turn the dial back or raise the threshold because we know you're a tough customer. But if we're finding that either because you're more interested in a broad range of information, or just because we've hit a particularly rich vein, that you're very receptive to these suggestions, and you're clicking through on the links, and you're marking them useful, and you're recommending them to your colleagues, and maybe emailing them to yourself or to some of the folks you're working with, then we'll start turning the volume up.
And so one of the things that seems clear from this, as we look at sort of the progression, or as I do, is that this, to me, seems like a way that's really going to accelerate the trend towards messaging platforms taking over from email, at least for internal communications.
I think that's exactly right. That one of the things that people are starting to realize is that chat is, although it's a great medium for communicating with your friends, it also is a great medium for communicating with coworkers inside the same organization. Someday, maybe it'll be a great way to communicate with customers and clients. I don't think that people have quite figured out how that's going to work, or what the communication conventions we are to make that. We need to make that work. So at this point, it's really about communicating internally. And one of the things that makes it so powerful is that it's an interactive platform where you can inject services and information and intelligence directly into the flow of the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, definitely is a time saver in that regard, right? It's because if trying to have a conversation as you talked about, let's say we're talking about a deal that we're all working on collaboratively. Yeah, I mean, doing that through, obviously you could do that through text messaging, but I mean, doing it through email is painful.
Doing it in email is painful, and also there's no way for an intelligent service,
right,
like a bot that's connected to your CRM, for example, to participate in the conversation. And that participation does not necessarily need to be heavy-handed. It may be just surfacing as additional context in the corner of the pane, some links to the things that you're talking about right now.
Right. But you can sort of foresee a day, because I know there's some applications coming out that are AI-based applications. Company called Curious, I think, if you're familiar with them, that saying, hey, what we're going to be doing is real-time listening into a phone conversation, transcribing, analyzing it, and coming back with suggestions about what you should be saying and when.
Yep. And I think that's bringing resources to conversations. I think the bar for doing it in telephone conversations is very high because it's real time and you're on the spot, but especially in chat where it's textual and you can take a little bit of time to think about your response sometimes, that bringing additional resources to that is very powerful. And so it's about, and it's a theme that I think we're starting to see from a lot of the leading tech companies, is how do we augment human intelligence with AI? it's not about replacing people or taking them out of the equation. It's about taking what you do as a human and augmenting it with the best possible input that we can deliver from an intelligent external service.
Sure, but we can't deny the fact that AI, intelligent machines are replacing people, though.
Well, they're replacing. I would say more than that. They're replacing people. They're replacing tasks.
Sure, but the net effect is, I don't think we want to, paint a rosy picture and say, hey, this isn't going to affect you, because quite honestly, it does for some people, and some professions, and potentially even perhaps for some people listening to the show, it could.
Absolutely, and it really is. There's been some great research by Eric Brynjolfsson and Annie McAfee at MIT on the breakdown of the tasks that AI replaces. And so if you're a legal analyst, for example, and your job is to go through large
discovery papers, right?
Figuring out what regulation relates to what, doing fairly routine search and analysis. Well, those tasks are probably going to be automated. And so it's imperative, if you've got a lot of your tasks are routine, you want to get ahead of this by looking at how do you find ways to focus on higher level, more valuable problems that are more difficult to automate, and leverage the tools to take some of the stuff that's actually kind of dry and routine anyway off of your plate.
Or to find some way to, at some point in a lot of tasks, there's a relationship with another human that's involved. Is how do you optimize that relationship? Yeah,
I think as soon as you start talking about human relationships, you get into empathy, you get into trust, you get into nuanced communication where there's multiple possible interpretations. There's a whole set of things that at the moment AI cannot begin to come to terms with.
And there's some question whether it ever will.
Yeah, I think it's a fair question that it's not clear at this point that AI research has really made any progress on solving unstructured problems. And so one of the powerful things about people is you can take them and throw them into a complex situation without any real guidance, and they'll fumble around for a while, and they'll begin to find structure in it and figure out how to approach it. And that's something that at this point, there really aren't any AI algorithms that can do that at all.
Yeah, so and I think that's, from my reading, and yours is much more sophisticated than mine is in this, but yeah, that's where I've been seeing is that, A is it's probably always best not to sort of bet on what machines can't do or won't be able to do, because the increases in computing power are happening so quickly that like I was reading somebody recently said, machines processing power is improving 100 times every 5 to 10 years, and people we're sort of limited in that regard. But
I'm afraid mine's going in the opposite direction.
Yeah, well, I oftentimes feel mine is as well. But you said it's that more nuanced relational aspect of it that for people listening to those podcasts and sales is those are skills the machines can't easily replicate in a way that's authentic and the way that's really human. And it's not the same as having a virtual VA, which, by the way, I find hugely annoying every time I have to deal with one. Doesn't mean I won't have one eventually, but the way they are today, it's so transparent that it's not a person that it's annoying.
Yeah, I think really, you think about automated voice response systems. Mm-hmm. They've gone from being terrible to being somewhat obnoxious, and AI may enable them to get to the point where they're tolerable. But you're not going to have an automated voice response system negotiate and close a large B2B transaction. For those kinds of deals, it's about figuring out what the customer's problems are, and then it's about selling change to their organization. And selling change is about vision and leadership and communication and empathy. It's not something that at least in the foreseeable future, AI is going to be doing.
Yeah. Well, I think there are, strata of the sales profession that we need to worry a little bit about is that, the way we've set up a lot of the SaaS businesses or inside sales organizations with this, lower level of entry level jobs where basically they've been reduced to appointment setters to some degree. And that if we don't pay attention to that could go away. That could be automated. And
I think that's very vulnerable.
Yeah. And so in those roles, they either need to be restructured in a way that we can find that they can add more value, and there's ways to do that, in terms of creating the relationship, maintaining, connecting, engaging, and developing the beginnings of a relationship. Or if it's just perceived that all they're doing is blasting out emails and entry-level phone calls, then that can be automated.
Yeah, and I think that's something that it can be automated, or when the tools are good enough, it can be a small enough burden on the account executive that they end up being able to handle it through these more intelligent tools. And that's what we've seen in corporate America is almost no one has assistants anymore because using Outlook and your calendar, it's gotten easy enough. I mean, yes, I think most of us would consider it a bit of a drag of on our time, but it's become easy enough to basically handle it on your own that you don't need somebody filing paperwork for you and sending around inter-office memos.
Well, it's become second nature. Right. Exactly. I mean, at this point, if I were to say to David, "Hey, we're going to give you this admin who's going to sit outside your door," what would they do?
Yeah, it's a tough question.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of they were there just for you, right? At this point, I presume you've outsourced all the things that that you could possibly outsource. So, I look at myself. It's like, okay, yeah, I've got virtual assistants I use for various things, but. Having a full-time admin probably wouldn't be fully employed. So
that's what makes us more effective, because the professionals who understand how to leverage those tools are able to achieve even more as a result. So it is important to be, in a sense, on the right side of this skills divide.
So setting aside for just a second, the human part and the humanizing part is so looking at bots and AI powered apps and so on, and let's talk specifically in sort of the sales space is where do you sort of see them going? Because there are some companies like Conversica and others that are doing some fairly sophisticated things with customers now, and top of funnel type activities, customer care activities. Where do you see them sort of going?
Well, so I think there's depending on which part of the sales process and which sales roles we're discussing, it can go in some different directions. I think certainly, with the current state of the art in sort of automated sales calls, there's certainly room for improving those with AI, and so top of funnel lead generation activities. I think we can certainly see more of a role for AI in conducting sort of the very beginning of the conversation. In my view, that's going to be more successful when you're able to do it in a way that people actually know they're speaking with an agent, but they're able to accept it because it's bringing enough value.
Right.
There's certainly all of the predictive analytics of how do you then go and improve these processes with an understanding of how to predict the customer's behavior. I think in the high value sales and the B2B solution sales environment, it's a lot more about how do you bring the right information to the conversation at the right time? How do you bring your own organization along and mobilize resources in your own organization to move those deals forward? And I think that's an area where chat and AI-enabled services can be very helpful. I spoke a little bit about our own solution, which we place ourselves in the enterprise search space.
Right.
And that's an area I think where AI has an enormous amount to bring in terms of helping people draw on the right information at the right time.
Yeah, I think you used the phrase in one of your documents is you help unlock the value of corporate content.
That's right. And if there's a great quote from Lou Plattner when he was Lou Platt when he was CEO of HP back in the 90s, that if only HP knew what HP knew, we'd be 3 times as productive. And that problem has only gotten worse, that enterprises have more and more knowledge, accumulated case studies, benchmarking, competitive analyses, market research. But a lot of it doesn't get leveraged because people don't realize it's there, or they don't have time to search for it, or they can't find it if they do search for it. And more intelligent tools like ModuleQ's AI for surfacing these information assets at the right time for the right person should make a difference there.
So part of that is, in using that, is that I'm just thinking, like, you talk about a quote from somebody in the past. Those could be on multiple different media, right? I mean, it could be audio, could be video, could be, text.
Yep.
How do you, do they all have to be sort of brought down to a text level so that it can be transcribed and analyzed, or can you work with multiple different media types?
So this is where there's really 2 sides to the equation. There's the data-facing side, which is about understanding what the data contains and what it means. And that is a major undertaking that's been going on for decades and will continue probably for decades. We've suddenly gotten very good at understanding what's in images thanks to deep learning. Mm-hmm. And natural language, certainly transcription is now has reached human levels of performance. So if you need to transcribe, AI can do it at least as well as a human. Part of the equation is understanding what's going on in the data, and there's a lot of work being done to do that. Once you understand that and you're able to attach some metadata that describes what that quote is about, for example, or in that image, then it's about matching up the information with the right person. And that's what we think of as the people-facing AI part of it. And that's really more about what are the people interested in, and what do we know about their priorities and their interests, and what kinds of topics or what kinds of documents or what kinds of content does that suggest that they might be interested in?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about it. And taking that example you just gave is, perhaps in a way that we're not even conceptualizing now what a sales call looks like in the future, right? So, maybe we start with presumption that it's video, and assuming it's not in person, but it's video, and there's some sort of, I don't want to say like a heads up display on the screen that you're sharing, that as somebody talks and says, we're really interested in maybe how other companies have got value from what you've done with this type of feature or benefit, whatever it is, it surfaces it, the bot goes out and grabs it.
I think that's right, and I think it's likely to be not just on the seller side, but on the buy side as well.
Well, it's a shared resource you're dealing with at that point, right? I mean, So whatever, it's completely transparent. Whatever one sees, the other sees.
Well, some of it may be. Some of it may also be private. That the buyer is seeing, well, here's all the other vendors that we've spoken with and their capabilities in these areas being surfaced to them. So it may be, the arms race, I'm sure, will continue, right? Between buyers and sellers, and there'll be a collaborative piece, and there'll probably also be a competitive piece to it. But I think the term augmented reality is getting thrown around a lot now in sort of virtual reality contexts of overlaying metadata on top of your environment. I think that same concept of augmented reality is going to be very relevant in business, where continuously you have agents in the background that are scouring the information universe for all the things that might be related or important, and helping bring them to your attention so you can more effectively focus on the things that enrich and move the conversation forward.
Yeah, and as there somewhat is already today, but going forward, there have to be sort of this complete acceptance on both parties' part that these bot agents are listening.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And that there really isn't a private conversation, at least not in most cases, between buyer and seller. I
think that's probably right. And so it's more about we tend to think about privacy as a sort of a spectrum or shades of gray rather than black and white. And I think that will continue to evolve. It's not productive to create a completely transparent workplace where everybody can see what everybody else is doing. That actually has been shown in some great studies to reduce productivity and reduce innovation.
Right.
But at the same time, yes, the bots are going to be watching and listening. And of course, it's going to be incumbent on the folks like us that are developing these bots to make sure that they're participating in a constructive and productive way rather than causing problems for everyone, in which case, of course, people will turn them off and find better bots.
Yeah, which raises the question then. So how do you take direction and to say, to make these things that are beneficial and contribute value as opposed to things that are considered to be intrusive that people turn off?
Well, I think it's all about closing the feedback loop and then applying machine learning to that. So some of the most obnoxious sort of bots, things like, if you remember Microsoft's Clippy, the talking paper.
Well, I had to resist bringing that up earlier when you first started talking, but
so they didn't have a meaningful feedback loop, and they didn't learn from the user and adapt to the user. But there's, in part, thanks to, I think, online games, we've gotten much better at, and mobile apps as well, we've gotten much better at understanding engagement and understanding what you tweak to improve engagement. And so there's, it's a continuous feedback loop so that the bot can, if it's designed properly, it can adjust and adapt to the user, and can even be at the level of things like noticing that this conversation is moving at a really fast pace. This probably is not the right time to inject anything. Whereas this one, people are going back and forth a little bit slower. Maybe some other people have already shared some links. People might be more receptive to having something added to the conversation there.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it would have been great to have one. Listening to this conversation, I could have had it serving me all sorts of facts about AI.
And probably asking me much tougher questions. So hopefully I'd have one on my side to help me answer.
Yeah, well, like I said, as I get more educated, I get more dangerous in this regard. So, all right. Well, David, unfortunately, we've run out of time for this episode. But obviously, we'll do this again. Pleasure to talk with. This is going to be a topic we're going to talk more and more about on the show is sort of trying to frame the future, if you will, for sales audience and help them understand what their opportunities are going forward. And
exciting time.
It is very much so an exciting time. So tell people how to connect with you and learn more about ModuleQ.
Yeah, well, we'd love to have them visit us at moduleq.com, MOUDULEQ.com, or follow us on Twitter at ModuleQ.
All right, perfect. All right, well, David, thank you very much for being on the show again. And friends, thank you for spending this time with us today. Remember, come back again tomorrow. Another great episode of Accelerate for you then. So if you get a chance to, also, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to it. Get a second, leave a review. We're anxious to hear what we can do to make this even a more valuable experience for you. So thanks again for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.